Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thanks, Joel, for being here. So we're going to talk a little bit about community and business models and VSCO, which is probably one of the coolest apps that I have on my phone. And so let's start diving into community. Joel, you started VSCO kind of while you were a wedding photographer, and it was heavily used by a lot of professional photographers, a lot of your friends. How has the community grown, and how did it develop?
Yeah, so it's actually, it's nice that we're in here. I photographed a wedding here, I think in 2009, in this building. Yeah, and I think, the premise behind VSCO always was, as a photographer myself for 10 years, Greg, co-founder, was an art director for 15. Kind of always felt like there were places for us, there was tools for us, but we never really belonged. There was never anyone that understood us or cared about us. And so we kind of said, what if we built something where we built tools and a platform in the community, and we ourselves were kind of the core influencer? And what if we kind of ran into the middle, raised our hands, and said, follow us? And really, VSCO's been that journey, and that journey's grown it from what was the wedding photographer, professional photographers, to then designers, general creatives. And I think the really exciting thing, and something that we believe is really, it's in everyone's DNA to express themselves and to create. And everyone's in a different place in that journey of figuring out how to express themselves and the tools and the means in which they want to do that. And that's where VSCO comes in. Okay.
So how do you, I guess, turn what has essentially been what started as like a utility app? If you guys all remember, I feel like I first learned about VSCO through seeing hashtag VSCO or hashtag VSCOcam on Instagram, and that sort of is a bit of how your community spread. And now you're trying to build it also within your own app, and so I know you allow them to write blog posts and those kinds of things. How are you thinking about developing features that enhance that community beyond just professional photographers?
Yeah, I think it's something that, the community kind of showed up day one, and it was an interesting thing that we embarked upon, and we launched November of 2011, and we made all this money right out of the gate. It's actually of how to build a business, actually started as a business. We were profitable for 2.5 years, grew to 43 employees.
Through what? How are you making money exactly?
So at the time, it was VSCO Film, which we still sell today, which is somewhat like a plugin for Lightroom or Photoshop. And that just took off overnight. But we took the proceeds of that, and we could either run ads or we could run marketing. And we decided that what we wanted to do is to tell the story of those that were using our products. So everything went back into highlighting the stories of the community. And these are things like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Street Etiquette, Joshua Kissy. He had kind of this fashion documentary called Slumflower. And we helped produce a book for that. We helped put on a show, raise money, that then he made a film that's at Cannes this year. And so kind of all these things that we took out of I could either run an ad to try and make more money, or I can help lift up someone in the community. And that kind of just has always had this effect. And so I think there's been that outside of kind of the product, and the product has been catching up. And I think there's a lot of things left to be desired, but it's also a lot of things that we want to be very intentional about, because I think, very early on when we looked at what was around us and where things were headed, kind of saw this demise of social media, of this pressure around kind of being something maybe you weren't. And so ultimately, the goal around VSCO is where you can be you. And so we want to think very intentionally around what we release around that.
Yeah, and it feels like that is kind of a big macro trend right now. I think at my publication and everyone else in pretty much the tech world is thinking right now a lot about Snapchat and how it will grow and how its community thrives. And it's not the same sort of growth story as maybe you sort of, as we originally thought of around apps and Facebook and Twitter and all that sort of stuff. I feel like you are similar to Snapchat in that you're both thinking a little bit more about engagement and community. How are you thinking about your, I guess, KPIs or numbers, or how do you measure community?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I think for the majority of other communities out there, it's judged by size. And again, kind of back to that, like early going, we realized that if we built a business that would require a community to continue to grow past an optimal size, in which you had to monetize the entire community, a la ads or other things, you were going to bring down the quality of the experience. And so we try to think of ways that we could build a community in which we could deeply monetize certain subsets of users while providing this experience for everyone. And so for us, like, we don't look at kind of a lot of the other social media networks. And I actually think Snapchat's trying to say this to not compete against Instagram or Facebook just because of how large they are. But there's kind of this notion of, one of our business models is around we help photographers and creatives find work for brands, telling stories that they need to tell on other platforms. So we actually want the Facebooks and the Twitter and the Instagram for them to continue to grow, that there needs to be more ads so that we can find more work for creatives on our platform.
So that's essentially a marketplace for creatives and brands. How is that? How new is that? How has that evolved over the...
So we've actually been doing this since 2013. The first campaign we did was with Levi's. And it's been something that we've done, you could probably think of a handful of brands every quarter. And so we're looking at, how can we scale this to something a lot larger beyond just a few handful and impacting, what might be 50 to 100 people and making a difference in their life through income, and how can we, bring this out to a larger scale?
Right. So in terms of, sort of the anti-advertising stance as a publication that also has no advertising, I understand sort of the reluctance, particularly at a time in which 80% of all digital ad dollars are going to Facebook and Google. But do you think, are you resisting ads because of a negative that they would have on your community, or is it because they aren't the right business model? I'm guessing it's maybe a combination.
It is a combination. I think, we were very intentional, and I also think, I don't want to sound naive. I think we were also very lucky to have the start that we did, to make the money that we did out of the gate and be able to grow as much as we did without raising capital. And when we did raise venture, that we were able to do it on our terms. But at that same reason, we always sought out from the beginning, like, we never wanted to be forced to make VSCO into something. And I think for any business model that requires it to continually grow past its optimal size, we just wanted to make sure that we weren't putting ourselves in that place to have to turn it into something that we didn't want it to be.
So you've always had, I guess, a strong community. It's grown into, I think you told me it's about 3/4 of the community is under 25, and there's a heavy concentration of teens, essentially.
75% female, 75% under the age of 25. The 18 to 24 is our largest kind of bracket, but the 13 to 17-year-old demographic is our fastest growing.
So how's maybe you could provide some insights, because you have definitely, when I think of apps that are, very much sort of geared towards Gen Z, I guess we're calling it now, like the people who come before millennials or after millennials. I think of Musical.ly, I think of Snapchat, I think of VSCO. How are you seeing, why, I guess we're sort of teens drawn to VSCO. How are they using smartphones differently? And what do they expect out of communities maybe that are different than sort of the apps that maybe I use or everyone else uses?
I mean, I think the first thing to recognize about this generation is it's not a one-size-fits-all. So there's not one app that they will use for everything. And I think anyone that tries to accomplish that is really headed down, a difficult path. And so for us, it's understanding that notion of identity, permanence. If you want to know who I am, check out my VSCO. You'll notice VSCO links in so many people's bios on so many different platforms. And so focusing around that, but also, VSCO is not a broadcast platform. So it's not a way that you're going to reach a multitude of people. It's really a one-to-one, a one-to-few. And in that end, it's a lot in line with, I think, Snapchat and their model of connections and community. And for us, it's, also with the avoidance of any kind of like public-facing stats that kind of dictate the value of someone or some creation. We've worked really hard at trying to keep that away, and that's also why this younger generation, I think, has also been really drawn to it.
Right, because you don't really have, you have reshares, but you don't have likes.
You have reshares, but nothing is public. So you never look at a photo, and you never look at anyone's profile and see how many followers they have. You'd never look at someone's photo, and as you're going down your feed, you'd never see that this has been republished 270 times or 2 times. And I think for myself included, and from a professional photographer background, my entire business and most others was based upon engagement of those metrics on other platforms. And I then crafted kind of how I was going about things in order to play that game. But I went away from what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. And I think for us, and I think, for the pro and for the kind of that culture creator, all the way down to the teen that's trying to figure it out and find their way of how they're going to express themselves, that's something that's really resonated with them.
I want to talk a little bit about community pushback or blowback. A lot of companies go through this. Facebook throughout its history, Instagram sort of recently with all of its design changes, a lot of companies just face sort of resistance from users when they have design changes. You guys last year redesigned your app and then redesigned the redesign.
Redesigned the redesign, yeah.
Because you had had some negative App Store reviews and stuff like that. What was that? Was that your first sort of brush with pushback? How did you deal with it?
Yeah, I think it was definitely something that, I talked about that community kind of scaling and growing over time. And it was very easy in the beginning because I built for myself, professional photographer. But I mentioned, 75% female, under the age of 25, 80% outside the US. I am no longer kind of our core demographic. And I think we had an opinion, which I think is actually still very valid, and I think something that's important to not lose. And I think we had some things that we did not practice within the company of having, in-house research, for example. And we've made additions to our team that has, really allowed us to better understand the needs of our community beyond maybe just what the metrics show. And I think that's something that is also equally important. And so, for us, I look at it of like, I want to be known by the tools that we give to people to allow them to create a platform and a place where you can discover other people, other content, and then ultimately, and a lot of what we're working on is meaningful ways for you to connect. I don't want to be known by a UI or UX paradigm. Like, that's not what VSCO is about. And so for us, it was a lesson of taking, something that we thought would work and it didn't, and iterating on that and growing from that. And it's a continual process. I mean, I think it's something that we're always moving forward. So.
And where do you go from here in terms of figuring out ways for, like, I know when I use VSCO, it's difficult for me to connect, I think, with other VSCO users outside of a few different means, but I'm guessing that's sort of an area of innovation.
Yeah, so you'll kind of see 2 major areas. So we announced something called Sends earlier this year, which is kind of our underlying image processing engine. The first thing that we launched around that was raw capabilities. And you're going to start to see a lot more built upon that of new tools to express yourself. How you engage with others and kind of show that appreciation, get feedback around that, kind of a meaningful connection standpoint is really the major focus over probably the next 6 months.
And then just last question, and then I think we're going to open up to all of you, so get your questions ready. In terms of business model, you have a few different ways you make money. What is where are you making most of your money right now?
So there's kind of 2 ways you can think about it. There's tools in which you can be a better creator. So we have in-app purchases of additional presets. VSCO X, which is our new subscription model. Yep. And monthly entitlements coming out beyond just presets and working on that. And then on the other side is then with brands. And so both of those have been growing very healthily, and it's something that we're really excited about and is also a big focus moving forward.
Okay. All right, so questions from you guys. We have the microphone in the back, I believe, so just raise your hand.
What is VSCO going to do to broaden its age group?
It's something, the question of broadening our age group, it's not really a need or a focus. We're actually not struggling in any age groups. It's just that, I think when you're looking at what's next, and we really like to focus on culture creators. They're not defined by any age, any region, gender. They can be anything and across all kind of various groups. And so we really focus on that. I just think this younger generation is really explorative and really trying to find new ways to express themselves. And they're curious and they're adventurous. And so I think it lends itself to that. So,
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
When did you have your aha moment? Like, you were like a photographer, right? Or a photographer. So
yeah.
When did that change? And were you very technical? Or were you just
She asked when he had his aha moment.
Like, when am I going to turn this into?
When I was going to turn this? I've always been a dreamer. So I think, the real aha moment was the day from concept to launching the product of VSCO Film was 3 weeks. 5 tweets, and we made $250,000 in 48 hours. So it was like everything bundled into one in a period of like the most tumultuous 48 hours you could ever imagine. So I think, from then it's been consistently it's not always up and to the right. And there's been definitely moments of things of, trying new things that haven't worked. But by and large, it's, really been very fortunate and just continue to surround myself with great people. And I think that's the most exciting thing and is the team that we have working with us.
Yeah. 2 questions.
Yep.
One is, what are the top growth hacks that work for you for user acquisition? And number 2, what are the top things that work for you in terms of user engagement?
Yeah. So the first question of growth hacks, we've literally done everything possible to not grow. So when we first launched our platform, it was invite only. And to be honest, it was because we had not taken any capital. I knew exactly I had to keep costs under control, so I'd let 1,000 users on the platform, watch their behavior, see how much our server costs were, and then realize, okay, we can add another 1,000. And really the reason to take our Series A was because the people we had already allowed on the platform started to really share a lot. And so, that's something that we continue to see. And so we're actually never really been focused on kind of top of funnel growth. Everything's been around who's already here and what are they doing and how do we get them more engaged and participating in kind of all the aspects of the app around creating, discovering, and connecting. And I think we still have a long way to go there before we actually, we've never done any paid acquisition, never, focused on anything of getting people to download the app or find it. So. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Right next to him.
Yeah.
So in terms of the people's aspect of the community, during the early stages, were you more hands-on or hands-off? And how did you, curate the community in that sense?
Yeah, well, early on, I led all of social media for the first year and a half, support. It was a team of 1 on that end. So as far as staying connected and around that, I'm very hands-on. But when you walk into our office in Oakland, you walk through this tunnel, and there's this projection on this large concrete wall of images from the community. And it's been very intentional that every day when you walk into the office, you focus on what it's about and who we're doing it for and what they're creating. And one of our biggest areas of investment has been around curation. We also made an acquisition last year, machine learning and computer vision around uncovering kind of the content within the community to better help our team of actual editors work with them to kind of better tell their story and highlight them. And so we look at it, whose careers can we help make, what causes can we bring awareness to, and so still to this day, it's something very intimate around the community, what they're using VSCO for, and what's important to them.
We have time for one more question.
Kind of piggybacking on that question, how do you guys define what is and what is not inappropriate content, and how do you mitigate that?
Yeah, it's definitely VSCO. As I was telling Cory this before we came in, we have this policy around freedom to versus freedom from, and I think anything that's posted to the platform that kind of hinders someone's freedom to be who they are. So VSCO is not a place for hate, and I do think there's difficult lines to kind of judge certain content around expression and what is or isn't. But again, back to that such young age demographic. Like I have a daughter who's 8, not 13 yet, but like trying to think of like what content would I want her exposed to and seeing. And so it's a battle. I mean, I think it's something that we continually work hard at and kind of creating tools. We actually just launched last week an ability for you to block people. And there's other things that will be coming around that of helping control your community and kind of engagement around that, just as VSCO's platform and community grows.
Thanks, guys. Thanks,
Yep.
Joel.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.